And I am a project manager and consultant with Echo Consulting. So today we're going to cover an introduction to project management, and really my goal for today's webinar is to provide you with some frameworks and processes that are really actionable, that you can take away with you today and apply to any of the work that you're doing within your current business. So just to start us off with some rules of engagement, really like these to be as engaging for you all and as interactive as you'd like. So please feel free to unmute yourself any point during the presentation and ask any questions that you have. You can also ask questions in the chat box. So if you look at the top of the team space, there's a little chat bubble. It says show conversation, and you can chat in any questions that you have, and Melissa will keep an eye on those for us. We also have a little emoji option right to the right of it, so feel free to use those for any engagement as we go along as well. Also, feel free to grab a notebook and take some notes, but be aware that we will be providing you with a copy of this slide deck. And we're also going to send out a survey after this presentation. We'd love to hear your feedback on how you liked it, what you got out of today's webinar, and if you have any feedback on what you'd like to see from us in the future. All right, so we're going to start off with a quick definition of what is a project. So a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. And really the comparison we like to make here is the difference between a project and operations. So we think of operations as routine activities, really those events or actions that we like to say are keeping the lights on. So these are ongoing and they're a crucial piece to the organization's primary business. There can be operations activities that are temporary but repeat. So for example, if you're a part of a marketing organization, you might do batching of scheduling and posting social media posts. And some might think of that as a project, but because it's something that is routinely done month after month, even though it's only a temporary part of the week or the month, that really is an operational activity in nature. Comparatively, if you're rolling out a new software or solution to manage your scheduling of social media posts, with the result of hoping to have more streamlined processes, then that would be an example of a project. So when we think about a project, we're really talking about activities that are going to lead to a specific result and then and that are often solving a problem. So we'll dive a bit deeper into that over the next few slides. And here's a great quote that helps kind of put it into perspective. So operations keeps the light on, strategy provides a light at the end of the tunnel, but project management is the train engine that moves the organization forward. So we talked about what is a project. Now, what's project management? Project management is a framework of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to help meet the project's goal. While there's various frameworks and techniques that can be used across several disciplines, these are just a few industries or segments that are using project management tools and techniques quite frequently. So here at Echo, we have experience in all three of these industries, but really our most significant experience lies in the IT space. So before we move into some of those techniques and processes and tools, I just want to take a minute to ground us all in the evolution and the history of project management. So project management's been around for a really long time. If we think about, right, the Egyptian pyramid and the Great Wall of China, really huge projects. And we also had the Gantt chart created in the early 1900s. But other than that, the idea of project management as its own job and career and discipline, that's really just come about in the last 50 years or so. So it's still fairly new and we're constantly learning. And project management really has gained a lot of traction as a career within this time. All right, so project management methodologies. There are really two core umbrellas when it comes to project management methodologies, and those are waterfall, traditional, and then agile. So waterfall and traditional, that's really the project management tool and techniques that we see from a lot of those resources from the Project Management Institute. So the Project Management Book of Knowledge, for example, but it's really a structure that has these 5 phases of project management that we're going to cover today. So the initiation, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. Now, Agile, on the other hand, that's a little bit more of an iterative approach. So there is a structure in place with different phases, but it's an ongoing process of planning, creating, reviewing, release, and then repeat. And this is really a common iterative process used in software engineering today, which obviously is so prevalent with all the technology that we use every day. So quickly, I just wanted to highlight some of the organizations and certifications that are in place in the project management space. So many often think of the PMP as the most common or well-known project management certification, but there are several other opportunities for project managers to gain access to courses and learning from these institutes. So we have Safe 5, we have Lean Six Sigma, Scrum.org, Agile Alliance. Would love to hear from any of you that are on the webinar. If you have any examples or different certifications that you've taken or that you've looked into, would love to hear about that. So feel free to pop those right into the chat. We love quotes here, Echo Consulting. So here's another one that we love. No matter how good the team or how efficient the methodology, if we're not solving the right problem, the project fails. So this is really important in when we're starting projects and really initiating those. I'm going to get into the details of that in a second, but it's crucial that we're really solving for the right problem and creating a goal around that. All right, so let's jump into the 5 phases of project management. So again, they're initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, controlling, and closing. So in initiation, this is where the project begins, right? So the first step here is identifying the problem. I like to say this is one of the easier parts of the project because we all find problems and issues in our businesses every day, right? So it's just about finding and prioritizing the right problems to solve. We do have other webinars specifically around the prioritization process, so I'll get to that at the end of this presentation, and we'll be sure to send out some resources on this. We won't be covering that in depth today, but definitely an important part when we initiate a project. Once we identify the problem, then we need to articulate the goal. What would our goal be in solving this problem? And this is one of the most critical pieces. The ability to articulate your goal will help determine the success of your project. So we want to be clear and specific when we identify this goal, so it can really be our guiding star, as we move throughout the length of the project. And when we have those 2 initiation steps completed, we'll start to move towards the planning. And identifying who can help us. So outside of the project manager themselves, we need to identify who are the people that can execute on what needs to happen, who needs to be aware, and who can provide expertise. And that's really where we bridge the gap when we start to get into the planning phase. And in this phase, we also want to be defining the solution. So it's really important that we bring those right people in to help us define that solution. And as we do that, again, we're going to use that goal as our guiding star. The solution needs to meet the goal, otherwise we're setting ourselves up for failure. In the planning phase, we're also going to be breaking up the solution into logical pieces. So some organizations refer to this as work breakdown solution or work breakdown structure. And depending on the scope of the project, the level of effort needed to complete the planning phase can vary. But ultimately, we want a clear guide for how we can get from point A to point B, broken down by steps and dependencies, as well as action owners. And once we have our plan in place, we move into execution and we move through the steps, right? We build the solution and we start to go into a bit of an iterative approach between executing and monitoring, right? So we planned the project, we've built the solution, but now we need to test the solution to make sure that it's going to meet the goal. And if the solution continues to need work, right, if we're not meeting that goal, then we'll need to go back into the execution phase until we've confirmed that the solution meets the goal. So one last area I want to cover before we get to closing and really transitioning to those operational processes that we talked about is adoption. And we like to call this the hidden phase within project management. A project management myth, if you will, is that the project is complete and successful at go live, but that's just not the case. We really need to have a clear and robust adoption plan as well. So we can do everything right and perfect up until this point, but if we don't have successful adoption, then the project has failed. So adoption has many facets. It can include, cutover planning if we're changing processes or systems, a clear communication plan, training's a big one. If users don't know how to adopt, right, then they can't. And then also buy-in. Buy-in is a piece that kind of moves into that change management processes, but really ensuring that your business, team members, and clients, whomever the project is supporting, we really need those members to have buy-in, and that will significantly improve the success of the project. So just wanted to cover really high level some project planning tools. So there are hundreds of project management tools and solutions out there, but these are a few that we really see out in this space that are pretty common. So this top row here, Trello, ClickUp, and Teamwork, these are kind of your entry level project management tools and solutions. They have some pretty robust and helpful free versions, as well as affordable starter packages. And then we move into some of our more mid-market solutions, Monday.com, Smartsheet, and Asana. These have a little bit more complexity in terms of automations and dependencies built in. So those are really common mid-market solutions. And then this next row that we go into, these are really our enterprise solutions, right? So Microsoft Project and Rike are two of those. And that last one is Jira, or its parent company, Atlassian. But really important to call out, right? Again, hundreds of project management tools, all really helpful, but it's really not the tool, it's the process, right? So if we're not building out a process that we all can work in within our operations and projects for success, then it's not going to be helpful. So 1 in 6 projects fail. And it's a mission of ours at Echo Consulting to help businesses reduce the number of failed projects. So we just wanted to highlight what, some of the most common project challenges that we see from work that we've done with our clients. So lack of strategic alignment, right? What's the priority? This is often an issue when team members aren't clear on what the priority is from their leadership. This also comes into play as it relates to the organization's goals. So we see a much higher success rate in projects that are aligned with the goals of the business and appropriately communicated with all their team members. The second, missing requirements and stakeholders. So this is a challenge that can often come up at the end of the project. So when users begin testing and using the project solution, it may be presented to stakeholders that weren't originally included and are able to bring up insights that others haven't been at this point. And bringing back to those phases of project management, identifying the who, that's where it's really important. And we're going to get into some strategies a little bit later on how we can help with that. But this can often be a really costly challenge, as going back and iterating at a later point in the project can be really expensive. The third is lack of visibility. So what is the status of the project? Are we communicating to all the stakeholders at a frequency that makes sense? Are we including the right people, right? Kind of connecting back to that last challenge, very important for visibility. So the fourth is lack of transparency. So this really comes up from a risk mitigation perspective. Are we making sure that all stakeholders are aware of project risks and issues? Do we have all the right people informed in order to identify those risks and issues? And again, we'll get into some solutions on these as well. And the last being lack of ownership and accountability. So, do we really have a clear understanding of who owns what, who is responsible versus who is accountable for different actions and steps throughout the length of the project? So triple constraint triangle, we like to share this concept in our intro to project management webinars. And it's really this theory which says that every project operates within the boundaries of scope, time, and cost. A change in one factor is inevitably going to affect the other two. So I like to highlight this visual, right, which essentially represents that a change in one of these components, like I mentioned, is going to affect the other. So we have a reduction in time and cost. That's ultimately going to decrease the scope of the project, and it's also going to impact the overall quality. So I'll pause here for a moment. Does anyone have any questions up until this point? You can chat or just take yourself off mute. Either way works for us. Okay, great. So we just covered all this, the overall framework of traditional project management phases. We covered a few theories, and we talked about those common project challenges. So as we head into the rest of the webinar, we're going to cover specific strategies and tactics that you can take to support each phase of the project management lifecycle, as well as help to mitigate those project challenges. So SMART goals. Some of you may be familiar with SMART goals, but this is really just a structure and a framework for your goal setting to make sure that to really help that common project challenge, as I mentioned, that lack of strategic alignment, making sure that we have our goals outlined in a way that's understandable and easy to measure for the team. So I'll give you an example. So my goal is to grow my network for my business. If I want to transition this to a SMART goal, I want to grow my network in Vermont by 10 quality new professional contacts this quarter by averaging at least 1 lunch or coffee in-person meetup per week and 2 larger networking events per month. So if we break it down into the specific, into the SMART goal framework, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely, right? I've made it specific. I want to grow my network in Vermont specifically and with professional contacts, not friends, but professional contacts. I've made it measurable. I want to get 10 new contacts. I've also made it measurable for how I'm going to get there, 1 lunch and 2 networking events. It's attainable. I've made a plan for how I can achieve this. Relevant, right? So making sure that my goal is relevant to my business, growing my network is going to help me grow my business. And timely. So I've set a time-bound structure to my goal. So I want to meet the 10 quality new contacts within this quarter. And I've also set specific timely measurements for how I'm going to get there as well. So this is a RASCI, responsible, accountable, consulted, supported, and informed. So again, this is another structure or framework that you can follow. And this is a really good one for identifying the who, making sure you don't have any missing stakeholders. And then from that, making sure you don't have any missing requirements because you have the right people involved. Again, also, if anyone's ever used a RASCI, I've used it in different formats. I've used it in the scheme within a specific project, but also just within an organization, within different roles that kind of overlap and understanding what everyone's responsible, accountable for, and so on. So to give you an example, this example, right, we have a project within the sales organization. So the project manager of the project, right, is responsible. They're gonna get the requirements, they're gonna be tracking and communicating with everyone. They're responsible for the project itself. Accountable, so that's really our project sponsor. So in this example, this would be the director of sales. If you want to think about it as, who's signing the budget, right? Who's signing off on the cost of this project, that's likely who that individual is. Consulted, so when we talk about a consulted, that's really someone that we'll think of as our subject matter expert, right? So within the example of a sales project, regional sales director, these individuals are often very constrained for time, but they have really valuable information and are going to be some of those individuals that are going to help us ensure that the solution that we've identified and executed on is really going to meet that goal. And then supportive, those are really those individual contributors, hands on the keyboard, those that may be doing a lot of the executing throughout the project length. And then informed, these teams or team members may not be directly involved in the project, but they really need to be aware of what's going on. So we're going to inform them throughout the length of the project. And this is an example of how you can give it, you can apply the activity, right? So we have the list of different project actions and then who the different stakeholders are and then where they're responsible, accountable, supportive, consulted, or informed. So here you can see Victor, that's likely our director of sales, right? So he's accountable for all these items within the project. He signs the budget because he's in sales, he's really responsible for that contract. Jean here, we can see this is likely the project manager. She's responsible for the requirements document, for the testing and training, and she's supportive on some of those executing activities. Heather and Richard, these are our supportive team members. They're going to be actually executing on some of those items, the build and development, testing, the user experience design. And then Louise, that's likely our subject matter expert, right? She just really needs to be consulted to make sure that we have the right information as we move forward. So project log, and this is a specific tactic that can help us with that lack of transparency, right? So that risk mitigation area. And this is just an example. It can be much more detailed than this, but this is really a simplistic view of where you could start with this. You know, some people may have heard of something similar like issue log or risk log. Project log really is all encompassing. It includes risks, issues, action items, decisions, and change requests. So really, again, this is just the basic framework, making sure you have a status, what the type is, what the priority is, ETA, and also we like to keep a log of when was that logged, so we can reference back to that. Oh, great question. Is Race-Ski Matrix a new development? I was only aware of RAFI. Yeah, so I mean, they're very similar, right? We're just adding in that supportive line item for some of those. It's just adding an additional detail into that framework. You can use the RACI. It's really dependent on what works for you and what your preference is, but we like to use the RASCI so we can determine those team members that might not be directly responsible, but are supporting those actions. Thanks, that's a great question. So communication methods, really here, this is an overview of the very frequently used that we see communication methods that are frequently used, right? So meetings, chat, email, weekly meeting, feedback on documents. And what we're really looking at here is this continuum of different team members and what their personalities and strengths are. So we have naturally in every organization, right? We have team members that are much more vocal and team members that are much more quiet. And when we use these typical communication methods, what can happen is we don't really have an equitable representation of data. If you see in this pie chart up here, our more vocal team members, they are really providing a lot more of the data points and input and feedback than some of our, more quiet individual contributors or project supporters. So what we want to offer here in terms of providing a solution is different opportunities or different methods for communication. So Scrum stand-ups, one-on-one weeklies, doing surveys, anonymous voting, prioritization matrix. So what these different methods do is it really allows those team members that might be more introverted or quieter, but really have a lot of valuable, important feedback to have more equal opportunity. So we're still going to see a little bit more from those vocal team members. Naturally, that's still going to happen within these different communication methods. But again, it's a lot more equitable, and it's really giving equal opportunity and making sure that we have the right quantifiable feedback and result that we need. So governance plan. So this is a kind of process that we like to look at and start to establish at the end of a project, right? So how do we make sure that we still have a process in place for communication and feedback and potentially more iterative updates on a solution moving forward? And this is where we really want to move beyond just the project manager. And this is when users, it's beyond the testing, but really when users are starting to use the solution. We want to make sure, like, it's a very important piece, and we want to make sure that we can continuously get their feedback and be able to provide actionable kind of next steps from that. So up here you can see we have the intake, and this can, different organizations have different processes for this, but really it's just a method or form of communication for if they have a training question, or if there's an issue, a bug, if they are having issue with permissions, or even if they have ideas or requests. So from intake, we're going to go to a review process, and we're going to need to establish a governance board. And again, this is where we go beyond just the project manager. We want to make sure we have subject matter experts and some leaders involved in that, and really just creating a meeting or a cadence where they can confirm and clarify those requirements, and then prioritize any requests that are coming in to make sure they're handled. And again, this is just a quick overview of what that process might look like, but if, it could be a no and that completely gets tabled, or if they review it, then it might go in the backlog and go on a roadmap for a platform. So if there's that approval, it could be a quick hot fix if it's that bug or defect, or it could end up being, something that's iterated on and released at a later time. So again, these are the 5 phases of project management that we just covered today, and it just kind of highlights the different strategies and tactics that we went over, mapped to each of those. So we hope that you all are able to take something away from this and use it in your day-to-day roles and positions. Again, I'll take a pause if anybody has any specific questions that you'd like to ask. Okay, great.
Hi, I had a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm currently in my first year of my studies. So I was thinking of pursuing my career in project management. So that's why I wanted to get an overview of this. So basically, what are the, major do you prefer to join this, field? Like I'm a sociology student. So
I don't know if you cut out there a little bit. I didn't hear the end of the question.
Yeah, so I was asking, like, I'm studying sociology. So can I think about going into the field of project management in my future?
Absolutely. So it's funny you say that. We actually think of everyone as project managers. And again, the career path and really position of project management out in the space is just growing and growing. There's definitely a big need for project management. And the really cool thing about project management is it really is applied within any context in business, right? No matter what business or specific subject matter that you're in, we're always going to need project managers. If we go back to that quote at the beginning, to really move that engine forward. And also, depending on different organization types, right? There might be large organizations that require some of the more robust types of project management solutions and frameworks. But our goal today was to kind of give you some easy to use frameworks that can really fit any business. A lot of smaller businesses may not have full-time project managers, so whatever position you can go into, you could really use these strategies within that. But absolutely.
Okay. So what are the skills, do you looking for candidates who apply for project management? Like, what are the skills will be an advantage to that field?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really, something we also like to say is project management is really another, I don't know if it's really another way to say, but project managers are really problem solvers. So really being analytical, being curious, asking the right questions, that's a huge component in project management. We really need to be able to uncover the right challenges and uncover the right information to be able to, they mentioned in the overview, right, to articulate that goal and how important that is. Project managers, you may be a subject matter expert in a certain field or industry, but also project managers sometimes might not be, right? So we're a consulting firm for project management, so we might not be an expert in a specific space for a client that we work with, but we have to be asking the right questions and be really analytical and data focused. So also going back to those communication methods and making sure that we're gaining those gaining that feedback equitably from across the team, that's also going to help us to do our jobs better and making sure that we're solving the right problems in the right way. So those are a couple of the biggest ones I would say. Analytical, being curious, and yeah, I forgot what the last one I said was, but those are the 2 big ones.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. Give anyone else a chance to ask any questions? Okay. Well, up on the screen here, you can see, I just wanted to call out, we have upcoming webinars. So we are a Smartsheet aligned partner here at Echo Consulting, one of those project management solutions that we talked about. If that's a tool that you're currently using, or maybe one that you've thought about using in the future, Smartsheet Best Practices is a really great webinar to join. We'll give ample opportunity to ask questions ahead of time to make sure that if there's specific topics that you want us to cover, that we can do that. It's really just meant to be, us be kind of a sounding board and some of those subject matter experts on that tool specifically, so we can provide you some of those best practices and information to determine if that is a tool that you would like to use, or how to best use the tool if you already are. And this next webinar was one I referenced early on. So improving strategic alignment with project intake and prioritization. So really that concept of making sure that we're prioritizing projects in the right way, that we're solving the right problem, and that we're identifying the right problems to solve based on the strategic goals of the organization. So we will send out a copy of this slide deck. There's links to follow us on LinkedIn, so you can follow all of our webinars. We have some of our contact information. We really, really appreciate your time today, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything or have any questions. Perfect. Thank you all.